As we learn about the significance of water this week, let us also reflect on the land which we gather, understand the history of the land on which we live, and that provides us with this precious resource of water. Niagara region is situated on treaty land, and this land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattaway-Wendouraq, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara region today. The Niagara Children's Water Festival stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live and the water which sustains us. So on that note, let's get started. So my name is Caitlin, and I'm a public health inspector with Niagara region. And you're probably wondering, what's a public health inspector? So have you ever been to a restaurant with your family? Have you ever got a haircut? Have you ever went swimming in a hotel pool? Do any of you out there have tattoos? Well, if you do, I hope you don't, but if you do, it's a good chance that myself or my coworkers have inspected those places to make sure that you are safe when you go to those services. And with me is my friend.
My name is Daniela, and I'm a health promoter with Niagara region, and I help to promote and educate on the topics that the health inspectors go to inspect on. All right, so our first topic today is going to be on ticks and Lyme disease. So Lyme disease is an infection that is caused by the bite of a tick. And ticks are tiny little insects that like to crawl, and they could be found in tall, long grass and in wooded areas along trails. So there are many different types of ticks, but only one tick can cause Lyme disease, and that tick is called a black-legged tick. So black-legged ticks are dark in color, and they can range in size. They can be very small, and they can be the size of a sesame seed, or they can be as large as the size of a small little grape. So there are many different types of ticks, but the black-legged tick causes Lyme disease. And the black-legged ticks, they cannot jump or fly, so they do like to crawl, and they'll attach to a rodent that comes by the wooded areas, or even yourself if you're walking by, they can attach to you and crawl onto you, and that's when they can bite. So we have here some examples of some ticks. So we have the small one at the bottom here is an adult tick, and at the top are some more black-legged ticks that have bit and are engorged in blood, and that's why they are bigger in size. So what do we do if we have a tick on ourselves or on our pets? So first of all, you want to get that pet checked out by the vet, and you can go to the family doctor as well if you notice a tick on you. As well, you'd like to bring that tick into public health, or you can give public health a call, and we can guide you as to how you can go about bringing that tick in. What we do at public health is we help to identify if that tick is a black-legged tick, and then we would further go on to see if that tick has Lyme disease, if we identify that tick as black-legged tick. So what do we do if we have a tick on us and that has bitten us or our pets? So we want to first ensure that you have an adult and a parent around that can come and use some tweezers to remove that tick from your body. So you want to gently squeeze that tick and just simply, pull it out of your skin. You don't want to brush it off or tear the tick in any way. After that, you'd like to place it in a plastic bag or a plastic container, and then you can call up public health just to see kind of the next steps to see if it is a black-legged tick. And you can also get yourself or your pets checked out after that point to your vet and your family doctor. So how can we prevent a tick bite in the first place? So when you are going around those trails, you're hiking, you're going on the long grass and wooded areas, you want to make sure that you are wearing light colored clothing. This is because the ticks are dark brown in color, so it's easier to spot them better. You also want to make sure you're wearing high socks, long pants, and just not having exposed skin around for a tick to possibly come and bite you in the exposed skin. So you want to make sure you're covered up. You can also use bug spray and just insect repellent that has DEET in it, and make sure you're using that appropriately, the manufacturer's label, how much you can use, and that will also help to prevent ticks. And when you are around the yard playing and whatnot, you want to make sure that your grass is cut very low, and if you have any leaves in the yard, you want to make sure you rake up your leaves and dispose of them. This is because when it rains, the ticks love moisture, they love water, so you want to make sure that there's no just leaves scattered and your grass isn't really high so that there aren't feeding grounds for ticks to be around. And lastly, if you are playing with your pets or outside in the grass, you want to make sure that you come in, you take a bath, you check your dogs and check yourselves for ticks, and just always being aware of when you are outside in those areas to be aware for ticks. So that's all from me. I'm going to pass it on to Caitlin.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about another insect that bites. So can you try and think of, what kind of creature is always just around you? It's super annoying and it bothers you and you just want it to leave you alone? No, it's not your brothers and sisters. We're actually just going to be talking about mosquitoes. So we're going to first talk about the mosquito life cycle. And my friend Rob, which you can't see, he was actually able to go out to the woods and capture some things for us to look at under the microscope. Okay, so hopefully you can see it. But after they become an egg, they're going to turn into something called a larva. And if you can try and see on this screen right now, so the funny thing about a larva is it actually has this little thing that looks like a straw coming out of its butt, and that's how it breathes. So it is able to breathe through its butt, which is very funny. So if you can check out right here, you might be able to see them. They are basically looking like a long stick thing. Yeah, so you can see it at the very bottom. And then after it's done becoming a larva, it becomes a pupa. So pupa, you can see in our little jar, they look like they're ready to go to the Olympics. They're tumbling, and we like to call them tumblers. So after they're done becoming a pupa, they're ready to hatch into a mosquito. And once they're a mosquito, we already know that they can bite us. So a really neat thing about mosquitoes is only female mosquitoes bite us. The male mosquitoes actually just prefer nectar and water. So if you've ever been bit by a mosquito, it was a female mosquito. And how you can see it is if we were to look at this little mosquito here, do you guys all see that pointy thing that's coming out of its mouth? Yes, so that is the thing that is actually going to go into our skin and drink our blood. And what happens when we get bit by a mosquito? Yes, we get very, very itchy. And we don't want that because there are some mosquitoes out there that can carry diseases like West Nile virus, which we do have in Niagara region. So in order to prevent getting bit by a mosquito, there are a few things that we can do. One of which is the same thing that my friend Daniela already talked about. So wearing long clothing in order to reduce the amount of skin that's available for them to bite. Another one is spraying on bug spray that has DEET. And there's also things that you can do in your own home to prevent mosquito breeding grounds from forming. So do you ever notice after it rains, you'll get water in your toys that are outside, you'll get water sometimes in your bird baths if you have it, or any pails or shovels that's outside? So that could be a breeding ground for mosquitoes, and you could actually have some of the things that are growing in here in those little standing bodies of water. So it's very important that if you see that, push it over. If you see a bird bath, ask your parents first, and then push it over. If it's on your toys, push them over, get rid of that water source. Another thing that you can tell your parents to do is clean the gutter, which is on the roof, because that could also be an area where mosquitoes like to go and hang out. And that pretty much concludes everything that you need to know about mosquitoes and ticks.
Awesome, that's the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for listening. We're gonna send it over to the chat and see if there's any questions.
Awesome, thanks so much Caitlin and Danielle, that was great information. And you're right, we actually do have a couple questions that have come in. So the first one is from Mrs. Beeching's grade 3 class, and they're wondering, is there a treatment for the West Nile virus?
Very good question. So for West Nile virus, unfortunately, there's no treatment for it. So that's why it's so important to try and make sure we don't get bit by those mosquitoes by using some of the prevention tips we talked about today, as well as some of the ways that we can make our home less appealing for mosquitoes.
Awesome, great information, and we'll make sure to take all those tips and tricks with us. So Mr. Breen's grade 4 class is wondering, can our pet dog get a tick? And what do we do with a tick if we find one?
That's a good question. So pets, just like humans, can get any type of tick that brushes up against it. So you want to make sure that you're checking your pets when they come in from playing. And if there is a tick on them, bring the tick to the the pet to the vet and save that tick in a plastic bag, and you can call public health and go from there to see if it's the bad kind of tick.
Perfect. That's great information. And we can find all of those locations for public health on our website at niagararegion.ca. Mrs. Miller's grade 4-5 class is wondering, we live in Niagara Falls. Where can we drop off the tick?
All right, so as you know, COVID-19 has disrupted some of our services. So at this point in time, all of our offices are closed to the public, including the Niagara Falls one. But what you can do is you can actually take a picture of your tick, you can email it to inspect@niagararegion.ca, and either myself, one of my coworkers, sorry, I just touched the mic, or one of my coworkers, we can check out your tick and see if it's the kind that can transmit Lyme disease, which is the blackleg tick, or we can let you know if it's another common tick, the American dog tick.
Awesome. That's great that you guys have that knowledge and are able to identify all the ticks that are around. Mr. Watson's grade 3-4 class has a question, and they're wondering, are there any areas in Niagara that have been identified as a greater risk for tick activity?
So actually all of Niagara region is considered a risk area for picking up a blackleg tick, and it's also really interesting to note that Public Health Ontario actually monitors different ticks in the province of Ontario, and throughout the years we've been able to see that the southern part of Ontario has really big blackleg tick activity, but also birds that are flying up north sometimes can have a tick hitching a ride off of it, and then it can pop off up north. So it's safe to assume that no matter where you go in Ontario, you could encounter a blackleg tick, and it doesn't just have to be in Niagara region.
Yeah, that's great to know that everyone can have an encounter with a tick, but we know all the tips and tricks so we can stay safe and make sure we can still enjoy our summers. So Ms. Schmaltz, grade 2-3 class, is wondering, how long does a mosquito live for, and how long does a tick live for?
Awesome. So that is a really scientific question, and you'll notice that there's a huge difference. So let's start off with our mosquitoes. So we already know that when a mosquito becomes an egg, it will eventually turn into a mosquito. It only takes 8 days for it to do that. But after it becomes a mosquito, it will take approximately 2 to 4 weeks to live out its full life cycle. And if you think about a tick, they're a bit more hardier, so they can live up to 3 years. So very different.
Wow, very different. Mrs. Turner's grade 4 class asks, why does my mosquito bite itch?
Good question. Okay, so we already talked about this little mouth part that goes into your body. So when it's going into your body, what the mosquito is also doing is releasing some saliva into your wound, and it's going into your skin. And this saliva then reacts with the body. Your body's like, I don't want it to be in here, get out. So it creates this little reaction where it makes it red, it makes it swell, and it makes it really itchy. So that's actually the mosquito saliva.
Awesome, very interesting. I did not know that. So Mrs. Valence's grade 3-4 class, they're wondering how many ticks are in the Niagara region?
Oof.
Tricky.
You're really putting us on the spot. There are so many ticks. There are tens of thousands of ticks out there, and it's not just the blackleg ticks. We have the American dog ticks, and we have other species of ticks that are here, but that is so hard to even guess. So I'm gonna go with 100,000. What are you gonna go with?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, probably the same. Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
All you need to know is that there's just a lot out there.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, we'll try and get back to Mrs. Valence's class for a little bit more information on that, but very good question. And they actually have another one. So they're wondering, can mosquitoes kill people?
Oh, okay. So mosquitoes themselves can't kill people, but certain diseases that mosquitoes carry can. So with West Nile virus, for the most part, the majority of people actually get better and they don't develop a more severe type of the disease, which is meningitis. That occurs approximately 5% of all cases that get it. And what could happen is you could die from it. There's also other diseases that we don't have here in Canada, such as malaria, which we do see in warmer tropical climates. That's actually a really huge problem, and it can kill quite a lot of people. So that was a very, very keen question.
Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Valence's class has
go
another
ahead.
one for you guys as well.
Good job, Mrs. Valence's class.
So they know what a mosquito bite looks like, but what does a tick bite look like?
So the tick bite looks like a bullseye. So it's kind of big. It's red in nature. It's got a circular kind of bullseye looking spot there on the pamphlet. So it's pretty big, much bigger than a mosquito bite.
So the neat thing to know about the rash that you can get from Lyme disease is it doesn't always have to look like a bullseye. It can look like any old rash. But let's say you got bit by a tick that doesn't have any type of infection that it's carrying. It might just look like a little teeny tiny red spot. But those are the different types of bites that ticks could inflict.
So many options, so just make sure you look out for all of them. So from Mrs. Nash's grade 4 class, they're asking, how does bug spray stop insects from biting?
Okay, awesome. So if we were to think about any chemical really in general, what if we were to take, let's say, who has air freshener at their home? If we were to take air freshener right now and spray ourselves, if we had our dog come up and lick it, there's a good chance that the dog will be like, this tastes awful, it doesn't taste good. And it works about the same way for bug spray. So we're spraying on the bug spray, it creates this layer on our skin where if a mosquito were to come up to us, they would be like, oh no, this does not smell right, this does not taste right, I'm leaving. So that's how it works.
Awesome. And Mrs. Nash's grade 4 class again, also they're wondering, can mosquitoes carry any other diseases? And what does the mosquito do with the blood?
Good question. These are so good questions. So for the blood, the reason why the female mosquito needs the blood is it needs the proteins in order for it to be able to create the eggs, which then the eggs, as we know through the life cycle, grow up and become mosquitoes. So that's why it needs our blood. And then the other part of the question was, what other diseases can we carry? Yep, we've already talked about some. So we already know about West Nile virus. We already know about malaria, which we do not have in Canada. And there's also something called Eastern equine encephalitis, or EEE for short. It can mostly affect horses, but it has been known to also jump species as well. So there's quite a few diseases that mosquitoes can carry, and that's why it's just so important to protect yourself and try not to get bit.
Awesome. I did not know about that. I'm going to remember EEC because I definitely cannot pronounce it again. EEE. So Mr. Pellerin's grade 4 class at Dalewood, they're wondering, how can we safely remove ticks from our pets?
So from your pets, you just want to make sure that you're still using the same tweezer technique and just removing it. You don't want to brush off the tick because it might cause the tick to burrow into the skin more and release then potentially Lyme disease infection. So you want to make sure you're really using a tick card or tick key here, or the tweezers, and just really pulling it by the body and straight out of the dog or whatever it's bitten onto.
So like Daniela mentioned, it's really important. What you would do is take the tweezers and you'd go right into the mouth parts. So it would actually be down like this. You'd get the mouth parts and you would slowly start to rock back and forth until you wiggle the tick out of your pet. And it's very important, like we mentioned, sometimes the ticks do get stuck in dog fur, so you might need to get some scissors just to cut around the area if the tick is really stuck in there.
Awesome, great demonstration, guys, and great question. So from grade a 2-3 class at Crossroads School, they're wondering, how big do mosquitoes get, and what happens to your body when you get bitten by a mosquito?
Okay, so mosquitoes actually do stay pretty small. Unfortunately, this is the only mosquito that I have on my table, and it's definitely not that big. If it was, I would be screaming every time I saw one. But for the most part, if we were to look at our pinky and look at our little pinky nail, they can be about that size. And as you can see, it's very small. And what happens, like we talked about, is when that mouth part goes into our skin, there's a little bit of the mosquito saliva that goes right into our body, and it creates this reaction like we talked about where it gets really red and it gets really swollen, and that's how it is in most cases. But in extreme cases like myself, I'm allergic to it. That part of my body will start to swell up, and it honestly looks like a hard-boiled egg cut in half in the area that I was bitten. So if you are allergic to mosquito bites like myself, make sure that you carry Benadryl and tell your parents if you've been bit, because it's not fun.
Yeah, very good point that some people are actually allergic to mosquitoes, and most of us just don't like to get bitten. So Mr. Lingerfelt's class, he asked, are there any natural repellents that you would suggest, like a citronella candle or even a plant?
That is a really good question. So in terms of like citronella candles and other types of natural smells, what that does is it kind of creates a barrier around wherever you're sitting, and what it does is it makes the mosquito not smell the carbon dioxide that you are emitting. So mosquitoes are attracted to carbon dioxide, and that's how it's able to locate you out there in the world. So those type of natural products will create that barrier so that it can't pick up the smell of your carbon dioxide or any of the other smells like the lactic acid that you have on your skin. So that's how to prevent it from getting around you. But once it's up close to you, then you really do have to use that mosquito repellent so it doesn't come on your skin and decide to, bite you.
Perfect. And Mrs. Valence's grade 3-4
Oh, they're
class.
back again.
Yep, they've got a couple more questions for you.
Excellent.
So the first one is, how do you know if you have the West Nile virus?
Good question. So the West Nile virus, it's very interesting because there's a whole bunch of different symptoms that you can get. One of them is you can start feeling really tired, really what they call lethargic. Your joints could also hurt. You could also have a headache, and you just really don't feel like yourself. So what you would do if you didn't feel right is you'd go and talk to your doctor, and you just let them know, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I might have been bit by a mosquito. What they'll do is then test you for West Nile virus, and what you would just need to get done is a simple blood test, and they'll be able to see in your blood if you have the little virus in there.
Awesome, that's great to know that there's a simple test that you can take to find out. And Mrs. Valence's grade 3-4 class, they're wondering, is there a cure for Lyme disease?
No, so it's the exact same answer as West Nile virus. There's no cure for Lyme disease. But what they do for both Lyme disease and West Nile virus, in case you wanted to know, it's called supportive therapy. So supportive therapy is when you have different symptoms, like you might have that headache or those joint problems, you might be very dehydrated. What they do is they support those symptoms to try and make you feel better, but you will still have Lyme disease, you'll still have West Nile virus, and you'll just have to let it run its course.
Great information. And our last question is again from Mrs. Valence's grade 3-4
yes,
class.
Mrs. Valence's class.
Yeah, and they're wondering, do mosquitoes live around oceans as well as lakes and other bodies of water?
So mosquitoes do like to live around bodies of water. So right here in Ontario, we are not by any of the oceans, we are by the Great Lakes. Now, pop quiz, what are the name of the Great Lakes in Ontario? Quick. Right, if you said Holmes, the acronym for Holmes, you're absolutely right. So right near us in Niagara region, we have Lake Erie, we also have Lake Ontario. So we have mosquitoes that hang out around those lakes and other bodies of water because like we saw in our little jar here, is they need that water in order to hatch their eggs, complete their life cycle, and then become mosquitoes. So they are absolutely loving not just lakes, but also any type of standing body of water like we talked about in the bird baths, in our toys that collect water, in the pails, in the shovels, and that's why it's so important to try and tip them out so we don't create a space for them to lay their eggs and have all these things swimming around in there.
Perfect. Well, that's all the time we have for today, guys. But thank you so much to Caitlin and Daniela for all of your wonderful content and your answers. And thank you guys for joining us here at the 2022 Niagara Children's Water Festival.